Alright, in this video I want to talk about how to quickly position and animate lights in MO2. Before we dive into the tutorial, I highly recommend that you watch the tutorial on lighting over at MotionVFX's YouTube channel. I'll leave a link with the timestamp in the pinned comment below. As a matter of fact, all of the tutorials over at MotionVFX's YouTube channel, I have learned so much just by watching those tutorials, so I highly recommend that you check them all out. Our main focus here, if you've watched that video on lighting over at MotionVFX's YouTube channel, what I want to show you here is something that will piggyback off of that tutorial. The two main things here will be to focus on the position of the lights as well as animating these lights, and we'll actually animate these lights with object behaviors instead of keyframing. I'll also discuss some environmental lighting and ambient lights as well. And then that third bullet there, volumetric lighting. I'm still relatively new to a lot of this stuff, but yeah, I'm not going to be discussing that here. Maybe that can be covered in a later tutorial the more I practice with it. Now the projects that you're getting ready to see, you can get all of these from my MO2 tutorial folder. You can find that over at www.bcraftmath.com/MO2. So in this project here, I have a checkered board, or checker flag rather, that I've created using a series of linear instancers, and feel free to check that out when you get the project file. I also have a chest poem that I've imported from Sketchfab. This is a free model. I'll leave a link to that in the pinned comment below along with the attribution. And the only lighting we have going on right now is the environmental lighting. So let's just go ahead and talk about that real quick. We can get some nice effects with the environmental lighting. So clicking on environments, I have this wooden bridge environment, and if we actually come back here and adjust the horizontal offset, you can see just by animating the horizontal offset, maybe with some keyframes, you can get some nice effects. If I switch over to perspective camera, you can see that we can also see those changes in the lighting from our environment. Switching back to active, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and talk about a spotlight. We want to get this spotlight onto our scene. We want to shine it directly on that chest pone, and maybe we want to animate this light and have it always focusing on the chest pone. So to do that, I'm going to add a light and I'm going to add a spotlight. By default, that spotlight is pointing directly at the camera. And if I were to come to this light, now, if you've watched my first video I did on MO2 where we created an intro from start to finish, I talked about taking a camera and dropping it into a null. Good news, we're going to do something pretty much the same with the spotlight, or as a matter of fact, the sphere lights. But for now, if you didn't watch it, I'm going to explain that concept to you again. No big deal. If I take this spotlight here and I drag it on its Z position to move it away from the camera, but I don't want to put it behind the camera. I don't want to do that. I want to put it away from the camera, and I'm going to drag it a bit further. If I switch back to perspective, right now this spotlight that we see over here, it is aiming towards the chest pone. But if we come and adjust the rotation of the spotlight, it's rotating on its anchor point. Now by doing this, this spotlight is no longer aiming at the chest pone. If I switch back to active, it may look like that it's aiming at the chest pone, but I tell you what, let's go ahead and go to our environment, go to environments, environment maps, and I'm going to select none. I don't see that chest pone anymore. So if we come back to this light, the Z position's fine. What I'm going to use my light for, this actual light, I'm going to use that for just position only. Most of the time that's what I do, just like I did with my cameras that I mentioned in the first tutorial. So switching over to perspective, again, adjusting the X rotation, it's rotating the light itself, but it's not focusing on the chest pone anymore. Same thing happens to Y. We're rotating on its Y axis at its anchor point. If I point the light in the direction this way, where the mouse is moving, now we don't even see anything lit up. This blue background is just the background itself. We'll change that right here in a moment. And the same thing for the Z. Well, this is doing nothing for me. So I'm going to take all of these and set them back to 0. And what I'm going to add here is a null. And this null, I'm going to go ahead and call it null light so I don't confuse my null camera with my null light. Scrolling down, let's take that light, let's drag it into the null. Now, just like with null camera and camera, I used the null camera for rotation for the most part, and I used the camera itself for the position. The same thing applies here. If I go to my null light, which is centered in the middle of my scene, this is going to be somewhat of our anchor point for the light to rotate around. So I have the null light selected. Now watch what happens when I rotate the null light. So this is rotating the light itself, but it's rotating the light around this center point because that's our null. And this is working because we have the light sitting inside of the null light. Notice if I collapse this, that light's gone because it's sitting inside of null light. Now if we adjust the Y position, we can go around this way, 360 degrees, and we're always focusing on that chest piece. Resetting that, doing the X position right around here somewhere, pretty much 90 degrees or exactly 90 degrees, the spotlight is directly over the chest pawn. Continue the rotation. Now we're beneath the plane, the checkerboard, so we don't see a daggone thing, but now I'm back here at 360 degrees roughly, and we're pretty much at 0 again. So I'm going to set that to 0, and let's rotate this up. And let's actually add a little bit of Y rotation as well to put it over here on the left-hand side. What's nice about this, if you actually put this exactly at 90 degrees, and if we have our camera, which I've discussed back in the first tutorial, if I switch over to the active camera, that light is directly to the left. Now MotionVFX's tutorial, they talked about intensities, colors, angles of the spotlight, the smoothness and all that. I want to talk a little bit about that here. But the first thing I want to do is take this chest pawn, go to its material, and I'm just going to reset this. It's going to make that chest pawn white. Collapsing the chest pawn. Let's go to the light, this spotlight that we have, and I'm going to enable shadows. So now we see a shadow coming off of the chest pawn. I'm going to take the position of this light and I'm going to bring it in closer so that we can see the entire shadow. I'm going to go to the null light and I'm actually going to change its rotation to where it's up a little bit higher, so to speak, or angled a little bit higher. That way we can see the entire shadow here. And now let's look at the actual chest pawn itself. But before I do that, I'm going to go to my background and I'm going to take this radial gradient and I'm going to make it a solid black. So now we can focus our attention solely on the chest pawn and its interaction with shadows onto the checkerboard. So what we can start doing immediately to animate this, we got the shadows going on without me going into the colors and all that. We can keyframe rotations, we can keyframe positions, but I tell you what I'm going to do. Since the null light is the one that's geared towards the rotation and the Y is what's going to rotate this light around this chest pawn, we can either keyframe this or we can add a behavior. Now I didn't mention behaviors in my first part, the intro from start to finish, but with that null light selected, we can come down here to animation. Let's add an object behavior to this null light, not the light itself. I'm going to go to Animate In. I'm going to go to Rotation Y, and you have tons of things that you can do with this light. All of these behaviors are going to mimic what I was just doing a moment ago, except we can pick a behavior versus having to keyframe. So I'm going to do this tick-tock soft in. Click OK on that, and let's play this through our entire timeline. So I'm going to drag back to frame 1. I'm going to click Start from Current Frame, and let's drag all the way to the end of our project, and let's see what happens. Now what you may have noticed there is that the light started over here on this side. And basically what it's doing a half a rotation and it's doing a tick-tock, so to speak. Maybe we can speed this up. So I'm just going to come back to maybe 120 frames. Make this, no, let's go to 90. Let's make it 3 seconds long just to speed this up a little bit. And I'm going to click End at Current Frame. So now we're just going to see this same animation, but it's going to be a lot faster. But again, the animation started over here. Well, we can tweak that by coming down to our rotation multiplier, and maybe I want this light to start over here and go all the way around 360 degrees back to the beginning. Go to your rotation multiplier, let's double it. So let's set it equal to 2. Now let's play this animation again. It's starting on the left-hand side, and look at it now. Is that cool or what? To make this even more interesting, I'm going to go to Object Behaviors again. I'm going to pick a different rotation for the Y. Let's go to Wobble Roll Y in. What in the world is this going to do? I don't know. I have the rotation multiplier still set to 2, so it's going to do one full rotation. There you go. I have the rotation multiplier still set to 2, but you may notice that the duration is not as long. And I guess by us picking a new object behavior, it did reset the duration. So I'm just going to bump this on up to maybe 4 seconds, 120 frames, and I'm going to click End at Current Frame. And let's play this. So check that out. Object behaviors, and applying that to the null, since the null is the rotation, you can get some real quick animations without having to worry about keyframing. To take this concept even further, let's go to the actual light itself. It does not have an object behavior with it, but let's adjust the Z position. Remember, Z position of our actual light is what will move that light closer into the chest pawn, or heck, even through the chessboard where we can't see a daggone thing. But with that said, let's go to the object behaviors with the light selected. Let's go to Animate In, Position Z, and let's do this Quantize Position Z In. All right, the duration is set to 48, but I tell you what, I'm going to scroll on up to 120, which is what we just did on the previous animation, and I'm going to click End at Current Frame. It is automatically going to start at frame 0. So if I just scrub the playhead, we don't see the light until we get to right here. And the reason why that's going on is because we're animating in. So technically what it's doing here, when we have our playhead here, we're beneath the plane. But if we come to our position multiplier for this, and let's set this to -1 instead of +1. If I go to the perspective view, and I'm going to scrub the playhead now, we got it rotating, but the light should be coming in and getting closer, and it is. You can see the cone changing. See that? So let's play this and see what it looks like from the active camera. So we had the wobble rotation and then this quantize position Z. And let me explain that position multiplier again. If I set this back to its default of 1, it's going to be beneath the plane. So if we switch over to perspective, and we can't see a daggone thing still because that light, if I scrub the playhead a little bit, that light is beneath the plane, and it's not going to get above the plane till we hit somewhere right around there. That's when it's first hitting the plane. But if we set this position multiplier to a negative, this should put it above the plane the entire time. Switching back over to active, let's just try one more behavior. Object behaviors, and let's do position Z, and we'll do a shift in. That'll bring it in from a farther distance, and it will end, to my knowledge, with this still set to -1. Let me set my ending frame at 120 so we can have the wobble and the Z position pretty much working together in unison. So what should happen now is the camera is going to start off in a farther distance, and it's going to end at this -3.82. So that appears to be coming off from way too far in the distance. Let's take this position multiplier and do -0.5 instead. So it's moving it in a little bit closer, but it's still going to move in some more as we animate this. So tweak that to your liking, maybe -0.25, making it even closer to begin with. So hopefully through this, you can see how you can take an object behavior. We applied it to the light itself to adjust the Z position. Tons of ways you can animate that by using just object behaviors without the need for keyframes. And the same thing applies to that null light for rotation. Now I'm going to take those object behaviors and I'm going to cut them all off. And now what I want to do to finish things up is I want to take this null light and I want to duplicate it. But before I do that, I'm going to call this null light left. Right clicking on that, duplicate. I'm going to call this one null light right. So let's take this null light right and let's adjust its rotation. Let's put it on the right hand side. So to do that, I'm just going to come over here to -90. And now we have two lights pointing on the chess pawn, same intensities and all that stuff. So just some quick effects here, what we can do with this. So let's take that light that sits inside of null light right and let's come down to its color. Going to give it a reddish hint. Bump the intensity on down some. Going to come back up to my null light left, change its color, and I'm going to bump its intensity up. Now this is starting to sell that three-dimensional effect even more because, we got definitely some gradients of colors going on inside of here. And to take this one step further, I'm going to duplicate one of my null light. I just duplicated null light left. I'm going to call this null light back. I'm going to position it somewhat in the back, or we can go directly to the back. Doesn't really matter. Give it a little angle. I'm going to go to that null light back, come down to its color, change it to a yellow, bump its intensity down. And with this, we have 3 lights, one over here, one back here, and one over here. We can also come into all of these lights and we can change them to spheres if we want. So I'm going to do that now for all 3 of my lights. I just did it for null light back. I'm going to do the same thing for the one on the right and the left. Now this has changed the way the scene looks quite a bit. You see this little yellow circle here, that is actually going to be that back light that we have back here, and you can see all 3 of those lights. If you don't want to render those shapes, for example, if I don't want to render that yellow light in the back, I'm going to come down here and check on render shape. However, if we switch back to our active camera, we're still going to see that in the reflection. Let's bring all of these lights in quite a bit closer. So null light back, just so I can see that shadow some more. Null light left. Don't want to render that shape since it's so close now. And then null light right. Unchecking the render shape. And now we can animate all 3 of these just like we could spotlights. And if we just want a still image that looks different than this, let's just go to some of these. Let's say the null light left. The actual rotation, I'm just going to rotate it on its Y to where it's coming closer to the camera, and you can see that over here on the left hand side of the screen. I'm going to bring that on over here like this. Do something remotely similar to my null light right. And now if I start unchecking some of these, let's uncheck the null light back. You can see how that totally changes the scene. Let's uncheck the null light right. Now all we have is the single null light left. But uncheck them all, we have no environment lighting, nothing of the sort. So bringing some of these back, let's bring back the null light back. That's from the backhand side. You can see that the back is getting lit up right here around the top of that chest pawn. Null light left and null light right. So imagine what you can do once you start adding behaviors to all of these. And I'm going to do that right now. So what I've done here, got my playhead back at the beginning, and what I did is I went into all of my null lights, the right, the back, and the left. And if you look at all of these names, we have something going on with the revolving of Y, the null light back, that's twist Y in, and the null light right is roll Y soft in. And then for the actual lights themselves, we have some position, ping pong Z in. I set its position multiplier to -0.25. That way it's above the plane as we discussed earlier. And the same thing is going on. Ping pong Z, some negative position multiplier. And then for this null light left, knock Z in with a negative position multiplier. Playing this. And I had them all for a duration of 48 frames. As you can see, we have all sorts of effects going on here. And yeah, one thing to mention about spheres, something mentioned in MotionVFX's videos is that it does take more processing power to render spheres. So if we were to switch all of these to spotlights instead. Now let's play this animation again. So all sorts of different effects, having a good time with object behaviors. And with that, I obviously need to lower the intensity for this. But yeah, you can take some other models and import images and animate the spheres or spotlights going around those as well. And I have 2 other projects that I put together that you can also find in the tutorial number 2 animating lights folder. One of them is a Darth Vader helmet, and I will include the link for that as well as the attribution in the pinned comment below. And for those of you that are members of the MO2 Facebook group, if you're not, I recommend you go ahead and join. But this is Link, obviously from Zelda, for those of you who are Zelda fans, and this project's also included in the project files. And there you have it, animating lights, mainly sphere lights and spotlights in MO2. And again, pick up those project files from www.bcraftmath.com/MO2. There's the link right there. And that's it for this video. I hope it helped.